Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today we're talking all about Eddie Van Halen's private life. But no, this isn't a gossip channel. There was, in fact, a band in the late 80s called Private Life that was produced by Eddie Van Halen, and they were pretty good. And I think that Eddie's promotion and production of Private Life really says a lot about what Eddie valued in music. And this is songwriting over and above anything else. Because I've said it once, I'll say it 100 times. Of all of Eddie Van Halen's exquisite talents, his ability to write, his songwriting ability was probably more important than anything else because it was these ultra memorable songs from beginning to end, cohesive compositions, great memorable riffs, wonderful melody lines, the whole thing. It was these songs that were the vehicle for his wonderful improvised solos. And the proof is in the fact that there are other guitarists who did wonderful solos, but that are less memorable than Eddie Van Halen. And that's because they didn't have these wonderful songs as vehicles for their soloing. Eddie did. He understood that you can't really have one without the other. A good song with a mediocre guitar solo is a bit of a letdown, but a great guitar solo in the midst of a mediocre or subpar song just isn't gonna cut it. And I think that Eddie knew this because he was very careful when he wrote to always make something impactful. And you can tell that whether he was writing for something in the more limited range, vocally speaking, of David Lee Roth, or the wider vocal range of Sammy Hagar, or later on, even on Van Halen 3, he was always crafting writing in such a way that always worked, no matter who was singing, because singers can sometimes limit the ability of the songwriter, but Eddie never let that get in the way. Now, Private Life are a band that are often compared to Heart, particularly the music that Heart was putting out in the 1980s, when they sort of transitioned from a hard rock band with two female vocalists in the 70s to a more power pop, power rock type of band in the 80s, along with sort of the general trends in AOR music. Heart made that conversion, and Private Life's music is often compared to that. Now, although the vocalist in Private Life, who happened to be very, very talented, her name was I'm just having to look this up. Kelly Bresnik. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Really good singer, actually, and really great stage presence. But there were some veterans in the band as well. Danny Johnson was the lead guitarist in the band, and he had played with so many people. He had played with Alcatraz, he had played with Alice Cooper, he had played with Rick Derringer. So he was a music industry veteran, even if he wasn't necessarily a household name. And it was a co-educational band, as they would say, because Jennifer Blakeman on keyboards actually co-founded the band with Danny Johnson before Kelly on vocals came in. And the whole thing really came together nicely. Eddie brought in Don Landy, the longtime engineer of Van Halen, to engineer their first album, and it was released in 1988 got by the name of Shadows. And I see it as a really cohesive, really well written album. Now, there's always been rumors that Eddie helped them to write some of the songs, and some rumors that I don't really think are true because it just doesn't really bear things out that he played on the album. That's false. I'm going with that's in the false category. But there's definitely something of that Van Halen spirit. I mean, it was recorded at 5150, which really makes it part of the wider Van Halen lore. And although the albums didn't sell brilliantly, and the band only released another album after their first one, this was a self-titled album from 1990, also produced by Eddie Van Halen. Musical shifts were about to happen, and maybe foreseeing those changes, the band sort of faded away. I'd be really curious to know where the members of the band are, particularly Kelly Bresnick, who was a very dynamic and very good lead vocalist. I mean, Eddie Van Halen had good taste. He picked a band that was professional, that was fresh, very melodic, and sure, typical of that sort of late 80s power pop, power rock sound, but they did it really well. If anyone knows what happened to them, whether they continued to gig live, whether individually some of them still work together, whether they went into other projects, I'd really love to know because there isn't a hell of a lot about it that the public can find. So that's my take on Eddie Van Halen's private life and how it's a window into his soul as someone who really valued melodious songwriting, which is one of the reasons we all love his music so much. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.